Two of the biggest questions that I get on the channel are, how do I know if I am throwing the right lure? And also, how do I know when to leave an area? So today I'm gonna show you my 4 lure approach that fits any situation that will answer those questions. So stay tuned, it's gonna be a good one. This video is brought to you by my apparel company, Finesse Fishing. Right now on Finesse Fishing, this exact hoodie, this salmon colored hoodie is on sale. You can get it for just $30 as opposed to $44. And these gloves right here, which have become extremely popular, are also on sale, down to $15 opposed to $22. If you guys would like to help support this channel, one of the best ways is shopping at finfishing.com. I'm gonna leave a link down below in the description. One of the most popular series of videos on my channel right now are the lake break series. This is where I go to a new body of water and I try to break it down in one day or less. A lot of times even 5, 6, 7 hours. And in those videos, one of the biggest questions that I get often are, how do you know how long to stay in a certain area, and how do you know what lures to throw? And I really have kind of a 4-step approach to any given situation that I go to, no matter the lake. I have been to a number of different lakes across the country. I mean, from New York to Florida to Mississippi to Michigan and everywhere in between. And I use this same 4 lure approach every single time. Now, for a while, it was actually a 3 lure approach. Over the last couple of years, I have added a 4th concept, and it may be the most important part. And so today, I really just want to go through that concept, this 4 lure concept with you so that you guys can use it as you attack different bodies of water. Now, the thing is this is all about the lures that you are throwing. I'm not going to talk really specifically about the areas that you fish. And I do believe that finding the right area is extremely important. Now, one of the biggest things that I do when it comes to areas is I never try to spend too long in an area. What I have seen, no matter where I go across the nation, is that you will start catching fish pretty quick when you get into the right area, almost no matter what you are throwing. So I typically don't give certain little sections of a lake or an area more than about 20 or 30 minutes, sometimes even less than that. And when I get to a new area, I'm going to use this 4 lure approach that I'm about to talk to you right now. So the 4 lure approach, it's really, really simple. I believe that simplicity is the biggest thing that can help you to catch more fish out there on the water. Don't worry so much about bait, color, what you're throwing, all this stuff. Keep it very, very simple. Now, the 4 lure approach, the first thing that I'm going to do when I get to an area is I'm going to fish something fast. That's what I call it. Fish something fast. So this is going to be a lure. A lot of times this is a horizontal presentation, something that you fish relatively fast. You know, 2 of my absolute favorite lures to use are a chatterbait style bait. I love a chatterbait because you can fish it in cold water, hot water, muddy water, clear water. You can fish it around grass. You can fish it around wood. You can fish it in a number of different situations, and it catches fish like crazy. Now, one of my favorite chatterbaits that I've used recently, and I've talked about this a lot on the channel, is the Mini Max chatterbait. This is a little bit smaller profile chatterbait, and I think that it just gets more bites, especially when you're fishing in highly pressured bodies of water. So a chatterbait is going to be one of the best baits that I use. You can cover a ton of water, no matter what type of fishery that you are fishing or what type of bass live in that fishery. A chatterbait is a great one. Another one that I use pretty much from, I would say, right after the bass spawn all the way into the late fall is a topwater of some sort. I would say that 95% of the time that I go fishing, I have some sort of topwater bait tied up on the front deck of my boat. And it's funny because I recently just heard Todd Castledine talk about this exact same thing, that he uses a topwater bait a lot to locate fish. And because he uses it so much, he ends up using it a lot when he fishes different tournaments. And it's the exact same thing that I have always done. I always have a topwater. And the biggest thing about topwaters, especially baits like a whopper plopper or a buzz bait or a walking style topwater, is you can cover a lot of water. And I'm going to talk about that a lot in this video, is covering water. Covering water to me is very important, because I think a lot of times people just get stuck in an area. And if they had fished, you know, the difference between fishing 10 or 12 different areas on a lake in a given day as opposed to 3 means that you're seeing about 4 times as much water as that person who saw 3. And therefore, you're probably about 4 times more likely to catch fish. So a topwater bait is something that I fish all the time. And like I said, especially after I get past the spawn. Before the spawn, I tend to use a lot more of the chatterbait style baits. Now, when I say something fast, obviously I just talked about the chatterbait and a topwater, but this is really going to depend on the situation that you are facing in your body of water. For example, you may be fish up north often, where you're fishing around a lot of smallmouth. Smallmouth absolutely love a jerk bait year round. Year round, that is, if I'm fishing around smallmouth bass, I'm going to pick up a jerk bait. I'm going to work it probably fast in hot water and a lot slower in cold water. But even if the fish, the smallmouth, aren't biting it, a lot of times they will follow it all the way to the boat. And then you might see on any given cast, hey, there's 3 or 4 fish following my jerkbait. This is a good area to stop and maybe fish. So that's something that I always pick up when I am fishing in the north and around smallmouth. Now, if you fish elsewhere in the country, if you fish a lot of dirty water, for example, one of the best baits that you might be able to pick up is a square bill or a spinner bait. If you're a river fisherman, those 2 baits work again year round, no matter where you go. So that is the first thing that I'm going to pick up, is something fast when I get into an area. And typically I'm going to fish in that area for 15, 20 minutes before I kind of use my second lure approach, which is something slow. Okay, this is something really, really important. If you get into an area and you're fishing something fast, but you don't get bit, but that area just feels right to you. Maybe you have had a couple of followers on your fast moving bait, or maybe there's just a lot of bait around. There's something in your mind that's saying, man, I think that there's bass here, but they don't seem to like the bait that I'm throwing. That is when I pick up something slow. And something slow to me is a jig or a Texas rig. Those are probably the 2 baits that I pick up more times than not when I get into an area and I just feel as if there's probably bass there. And again, this is if I'm fishing in really shallow water or really deep water. I like a jig and a Texas rig. You know, you can use a Texas rig. You can kind of fit the Texas rig to the situation that you're fishing. If I'm fishing offshore brush piles, my first Texas rig is probably going to be a Zoom Old Monster 10.5-inch worm. If I'm fishing really shallow, it's probably going to be a Berkeley Pit Boss. Those are 2 of my favorite Texas rig baits in the world. I feel like they catch a ton of different fish. And so that's the next thing that I'm going to pick up, is something slow. A lot of times something slow also means kind of almost a vertical presentation. When you pitch a jig or cast a Texas rig into the water, that bait's going to fall vertically to the bottom and then you're going to hop it across the bottom. What I have found is that there are days out there on the water, even hours, because this can change from hour to hour. But there are days that out there on the water where the bass simply want that vertical presentation. They want something dropping and then going across the bottom. A lot of times you're going to get that hit on the initial fall. There are days where they want something horizontal, like we talked about earlier, something fast. There are days when they want something vertical, something dropping down and then worked very, very slow across the bottom. Also, I will pick up something slow even if I already am catching fish on something fast, but I just want to maximize an area. So what I mean by that is, say if I'm actually fishing a tournament and I go around a point with a jerkbait and I catch 7 or 8 fish on that jerkbait, instead of going to hit another point with that jerkbait, if I don't have a lot of areas or a lot of time to kind of digest the water and go fishing, I might fish that exact same point, but with something slow, kind of doing something that's just different. Because every bass out there, what we have found through a lot of different studies, they have almost different personalities. It's not that they actually have a personality, but they do different things. They respond to lures a lot differently. So there may be 40 bass on that point, and I just happen to catch 7 of them on a jerkbait. Now, if I go back with something slow, like a Texas rig or a jig, then I might be able to pick up another 4, 5, 6 different fish on something slow. So that's when I pick up something slow. That's the second part of the 4-part approach. So let's go on to number 3, which is something finesse. Again, like I just talked about, if I'm in an area, I have fished something fast, I have fished something slow, and I just believe in this area. I feel like there's fish in this area, or I have caught fish on something fast and something slow. And again, I want to maximize that area. The next thing I pick up is something finesse. Finesse, finesse, finesse. Now, again, there's a lot of different lures that could be lumped into this category. You could put a Nico rig up there. A Ned rig is a great one. My all-time favorite finesse rig that I always pick up, that's always on the front deck of my boat though, is a drop shot. And it's usually a drop shot straight tail worm of some sort. Now again, you want to fit the drop shot to the situation that you're fishing. If I'm fishing up in the north, or I'm fishing in really not heavily, if there's not a ton of cover in the area, I will fish an exposed hook, and I will simply nose hook that drop shot worm. That gives me the best hookup ratio and the best way to get a fish in the boat. Now, if I'm fishing around a lot of cover, maybe I'm fishing around stumps, or maybe I'm actually pitching a drop shot to the shoreline where there's a lot of brush, which I do that a ton, I will fish that drop shot as kind of Texas style, where I take my hook, I rig it Texas style on that straight tail worm, and I'm going to fish it through all that cover, whether that's rock, whether that's wood, or whether that's grass. Now, a drop shot to me, it just gets the job done. I like the robo worms. You guys have heard this probably 100 times, maybe not 100 times, but you've heard it a ton on my channel. I believe in the robo worm. It is a great bait to fish for smallmouth, spots, or largemouth. I keep my color selection fairly simple too. I love the margarita mutilator color, that purplish color. Sometimes like a pink color can also be really good. I don't know why, but a pink color works good. And then some sort of like shad type pattern. If the bass are feeding on bait fish of some sort, I'm going to pick up that kind of shad or bait fish colored presentation. A lot of times it's going to be fairly clear, fairly light in color. But that is really what I like to do. So that's the third part of the approach. Now, that used to be where I ended things. If I went to an area, usually in about 15, 20, 30 minutes, I could fish all 3 of those, something fast, something slow, and something finesse. And if I didn't catch a fish on those, I leave that area. Now, I still do that, but now I don't do that. Now I pick up the 4th option. And the 4th option has become, I don't want to use the term game changer, but really I feel like it is a game changer because it's something that it's made a big difference over the last couple of years for me, because there's areas where I thought there was no fish. I pick up this 4th option, and then I realize there are fish here. So in that 4th option, let's go ahead and talk about it. It's a glide bait, okay? A glide bait, no matter the fishery, no matter where you live in the country, pond, lake, river, smallmouth, spotted bass, largemouth, no matter what, you should have some sort of glide bait with you. And this is something that I've really just kind of learned over the last couple of years as I've tried to learn the glide bait more, because the reason that a glide bait is something that you want to have with you is what I found is that a lot of anglers like to fish very similar baits. So say you pick that same point that we talked about and you fish something fast, you don't catch a fish. You fish something slow, you don't catch a fish. You fish something finesse, you don't catch a fish. Well, guess what? A lot of other anglers have probably fished kind of in those 3 manners on that particular point. Maybe they didn't fish all three, but maybe a guy came up to that point, he fished something fast. A different guy came up, he threw something slow. A different guy came up, he threw something finesse. There's not a lot of guys out there who are willing to throw something that's big, like a glide bait. And what I have found is that you can go behind people, throw that glide bait, and you will catch some of not only the biggest fish in that area, but sometimes you simply see the fish. This is something that is really, really important, and I hope that you're still around, because I think it's one of the most important things that I've learned over the last probably year or two, is that timing is everything. That's something that I've always known, but the glide bait helps you to know if the timing was off. Because sometimes I'll go through an area, I'll fish those first 3 phases, and I won't get bit. But then I'll throw that glide bait. Sometimes I don't get bit, but sometimes what happens is I see a lot of followers come out on my bait. Maybe I'm working that bait back, I have a couple come up and swipe it, or I simply see. The other day, for example, I had fished a grassy area. I had fished it with a chatterbait. I had flipped and pitched it with a Texas rig, and then I threw a Cinco, a wacky rig through it. Nothing. I picked up a glide bait, I threw it in there, and on the first cast, I had 2.5 pounders following that bait on. On I think the third cast, I had 2 over 3 pounds follow that bait back. So what it told me was the timing was off. Those fish were there, but my timing was off. And so sometimes when that happens, when I have those followers after I fished a lot of different techniques, I know that I need to just come back to this area at some point in time. Maybe after the wind picks up. Maybe if clouds move into the area. Maybe it's just fishing it in the afternoon versus the morning, or vice versa, in the morning versus the afternoon. What I know though with fishing the glide bait is fish will follow that bait in, and you will see them, and you will realize, man, there's a lot of fish in this area, and I just need to time it just right. So that is something that I cannot tell you how important it is. Like I talked about with that grass area, I actually had those fish come out on the glide bait. I came back an hour later, ended up catching one of those 2.5 pounders. It was in a tournament, so it made a big difference to me. But that is what a glide bait can do in your areas. And the good thing is that you can do this in shallow water and deep water. This is crazy, but this is something else that really clicked with me earlier in this year, is that I was fishing offshore stumps on a particular body of water, and I threw those first 3 over it. I threw a deep diving crankbait, I threw my big worm and a drop shot, no bites. I picked up a glide bait, threw that glide bait out, and this stump was sitting in about 16 foot. I was sitting in about 20 foot. Let that glide bait sink very slowly all the way down to the right above that stump, and then I started working that bait right above that stump, and I saw this big blob come out of the stump. This was on my forward-facing sonar. I saw this big blob come out, and he didn't eat the bait, but he followed that bait all the way back to the boat, and I saw that it was a 4-pounder, but he didn't want the glide bait. I tried again to get him to eat the glide bait, nothing. I came back again, timing. I came back later that afternoon. I threw the big worm. I caught that exact same fish. So guys, that is my 4-step approach. I usually fish an area for 15 to 30 minutes at max. I'm going to use those 4 lures. If I don't get bit, I'm going to go to the next spot and start doing it all over again. If I have those followers, that's when I know that I'm going to come back. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And also you can pick up fin gear here. And if you want to watch that lake break series that I was talking about, I'm going to leave a link for it right here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.